Marcus stands frozen in his son's dorm room at Yale, watching Miles pack to leave. "You knew about me for 18 years, Miles says, his voice breaking. "And you never once tried to find me." The valedictorian who just called him dad yesterday now won't meet his eyes. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. Marcus Whitfield wasn't supposed to be here. The leather seat of his Bentley suddenly felt suffocating as he sat in the parking lot of Westbridge Academy, watching parents stream toward the auditorium in their department store suits and hurried optimism. His assistant had put this on his calendar weeks ago. Some obligation to show face at the school his foundation donated to. Smile for a few photos. Shake hands with the scholarship recipients who'd benefit from his tax-deductible generosity. He'd forgotten about it until this morning. And now his temples throbbed with the kind of headache that came from too little sleep and too much of everything else that was supposed to make him happy. He checked his Rolex. 7 minutes until the ceremony started. He could still leave, send a representative, write a bigger check. But something kept him in that seat, some nameless weight that had been pressing on his chest for months now, maybe years. At 45, Marcus had everything a man was supposed to want. $3 billion in the bank. Penthouse overlooking Central Park, his name on buildings across Manhattan. And yet he'd woken up this morning in his $12 million apartment feeling like he was suffocating in someone else's life. The June evening was too perfect, the kind that made you believe in second chances. Marcus forced himself out of the car, straightening his Tom Ford suit jacket out of habit rather than necessity. It already fit perfectly. Everything in his life fit perfectly now. That was the problem. Inside the auditorium, the air hummed with that particular brand of hope that only exists at high school graduations. Marcus found his designated seat in the third row, reserved with a small placard bearing his name. The principal would introduce him later, say something about his philanthropy, his vision for education. They never mentioned that he'd barely graduated high school himself, that his first million came from an app he'd coded in a basement apartment while surviving on ramen and rage. The seats around him filled quickly. A woman to his right smiled nervously, probably recognizing him from Forbes covers. He gave her his practiced smile, the one that looked genuine in photographs, and turned his attention to the program in his hands. Westbridge Academy class of 2025. 217 graduates. He was supposed to care about all of them equally. The lights dimmed, and Marcus felt his shoulders relax slightly in the darkness. He was good at being invisible when he wanted to be, despite his net worth. The principal walked to the podium with the kind of forced enthusiasm educators perfect over decades. "Welcome. Thank you for coming. This incredible class. Bright futures ahead." Marcus had heard versions of this speech at a dozen schools his foundation supported. His mind started to drift toward the acquisition deal he'd left unfinished at the office, the stocks he needed to check, the emptiness waiting for him back at that penthouse. Then he saw her. She walked in late, slipping through a side door near the front of the auditorium with the quiet urgency of someone who'd fought traffic and lost. The woman moved with an efficiency that seemed carved into her bones, and even in profile, even after 18 years, Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat like he'd been punched. Jasmine Brooks. She looked different. The same but different in the way that time changes everyone except in the places that matter. Her hair was natural now, pulled back in a way that highlighted the angles of her face. She wore a navy dress that was elegant without trying, and there was something in the set of her shoulders that hadn't been there before. A kind of hardness. Or maybe it was strength. He'd never learned the difference. Marcus watched as she found a seat in the second row, just ahead of him and to the left, close enough that he could see the slight tremble in her hands as she clutched her purse. Close enough that when she turned her head to whisper something to the person beside her, he caught her profile and felt 18 years collapse into nothing. His heart hammered against his ribs. This couldn't be coincidence. Westbridge Academy was in Connecticut, nearly an hour from the city. Jasmine had lived in Brooklyn back then, in a tiny apartment she'd been so proud of. What was she doing here? The principal was still talking, but Marcus couldn't hear him anymore. All he could hear was his own pulse, loud and accusing in his ears. The last time he'd seen Jasmine, she'd been standing in his office at 3 a.m, tears streaming down her face, telling him she was pregnant. He'd been 27 then, hungry and ruthless, and convinced that nothing could derail his trajectory. His company was 6 months from going public. 6 months from making him everything he'd sworn he'd become. He'd given her $20,000. Told her he'd cover everything, that she needed to take care of it, that they both knew this wasn't the right time. She'd looked at him with those dark eyes that had once looked at him like he hung the moon, and something in them had died right there in his chrome and glass office. She'd taken the money, said she'd call him when it was done. She never called. He'd tried to reach her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. She'd stopped coming to work. He'd told himself it was better this way, cleaner. She'd made her choice. He'd made his. The company went public, and he became everything he'd wanted to be. And he never heard from Jasmine Brooks again. Until now. Marcus felt sweat prickling at the back of his neck despite the auditorium's aggressive air conditioning. Why was she here? The timing gnawed at him. 18 years. The graduates were all 17, 18 years old. Number. It wasn't possible. She'd taken the money. She'd agreed. Unless. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair hard enough to hurt. He forced himself to breathe normally, to look normal, even as his mind raced through calculations and implications. Maybe she'd moved out here. Maybe she'd remarried, had other kids. Maybe this had nothing to do with him at all. But Jasmine hadn't turned around yet. Hadn't seen him, and Marcus found himself unable to look away from the back of her head, from the way she held herself so carefully still, like she was bracing for impact. The principal was introducing the valedictorian now. Marcus forced himself to focus on the stage, on anything except the woman sitting 3 rows ahead and 18 years behind him. A young man was walking to the podium, tall and lanky in his graduation robes. The audience applauded, and Marcus clapped automatically, his hands moving without input from his brain. The valedictorian started his speech with a joke that got some laughs. Marcus tried to listen, but the words slid past him like water. He couldn't stop watching Jasmine. She sat perfectly straight, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that he could see the tension from here. And there was something about her posture, something almost fearful, that made his stomach turn. Then the valedictorian said something that made Jasmine's shoulders shake. Just slightly, just enough that Marcus saw it. He forced himself to actually look at the young man on stage. Really look at him. The kid had good posture, spoke with the kind of confidence that came from being told you were smart your whole life. He was talking about perseverance now, about how his mother had raised him to believe that excellence wasn't optional. My mom always said, the young man continued, his voice carrying across the auditorium with practiced ease, that we're not just building our own futures, we're honoring the sacrifices of everyone who believed in us. There was something familiar about the way he moved, the gesture he made with his left hand when he was making a point, the slight tilt of his head when he paused for effect. Marcus felt cold. He fumbled with his program, nearly dropping it, finding the page with the valedictorian's profile. The booklet shook in his hands. Miles Brooks, 4.5 GPA, captain of the debate team, full scholarship to Yale. Interests include computer programming and entrepreneurship. Brooks. The kid was still talking, but Marcus couldn't hear him anymore over the roaring in his ears. He stared at the photo in the program, a professional headshot of a young man with warm brown skin, high cheekbones, and startlingly light brown eyes that Marcus saw every morning in his own mirror. The resemblance wasn't obvious, not at first glance, but now that he was looking, really looking, it was everywhere. The shape of his jaw, the way his eyebrows drew together when he was thinking, that same restless energy that made Marcus unable to sit still through meetings. His hands went numb. On stage, Miles Brooks, valedictorian, 18 years old, scholarship recipient of the Whitfield Foundation, continued his speech about opportunity and gratitude. And sitting in the second row, Jasmine Brooks kept her eyes fixed on her son, like she was willing him to get through this speech without incident. Like she was praying he wouldn't look out into the audience and see the man who'd paid to make him disappear. Marcus couldn't breathe. The air in the auditorium felt thick and poisonous. She hadn't done it. Jasmine hadn't terminated the pregnancy. She'd taken his money and she'd kept the baby, and for 18 years she'd raised their son alone. His son. He had a son. The implications crashed over him like waves. 18 years of birthdays he'd missed. First words, first steps, first day of school. All of it. Gone. And not just gone, but deliberately hidden from him. She'd made the choice to cut him out completely, to let him believe he'd dodged a bullet while she'd been raising a child. His child. Anger flared hot in his chest, mixing with something that felt dangerously close to grief. She had no right. Whatever he'd said that night, whatever he'd done, she should have told him. He deserved to know. The money had been for her choice, not for her to lie to him for nearly 2 decades. But underneath the anger was something else. Something that made his hands shake and his vision blur at the edges. That was his son up there. Brilliant, confident, heading to Yale. His son existed in the world, and Marcus had missed everything. Every single thing that mattered. Miles was wrapping up his speech now, talking about stepping into the future with courage. The audience began to applaud, and Marcus stood automatically, his body moving on autopilot while his mind spun in circles. Everyone was standing. A standing ovation for the valedictorian. For his son, Marcus clapped until his palms stung, watching this young man who had his eyes and Jasmine's grace take a bow. And then Miles did something that made Marcus's heart stop. He looked directly at his mother and mouthed "thank you," and the naked love in that gesture, the pure recognition of sacrifice and devotion, hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sat down hard as the applause continued. Jasmine was crying now, not bothering to hide it, and Marcus understood with sudden clarity that whatever had been between them, whatever he'd destroyed that night in his office, had been transformed into something else entirely. She'd taken his rejection and his money, and she'd built a life. A good life. Better than good. Their son was exceptional. The ceremony continued, but Marcus was trapped in his own head, in his own cascading realizations. The foundation scholarship. Miles had received money from his foundation. Had Jasmine known? Had she deliberately applied for it? Was this revenge, making him fund the child he'd wanted to erase? Or was it the cruelest kind of coincidence? He needed to talk to her. Needed to understand. Needed to, what? Explain? Apologize? Demand answers? All of it felt inadequate and necessary at the same time. The principal was announcing the graduates now, reading names alphabetically. Marcus watched Jasmine stand when they called Miles's name. Watched her cheer with the kind of pride that came from 18 years of showing up every single day. When had she slept? How had she afforded it? What had she told Miles about his father? The questions multiplied like cells dividing, overwhelming him with their weight. As the ceremony concluded and people began to file out, Marcus stayed frozen in his seat. He watched Jasmine stand, watched her gather her purse and program. And then, as if she could feel his eyes on her, she turned. Their gazes locked across the rows of emptying seats, and Marcus saw the exact moment she recognized him. Her face went pale, then flushed, then settled into something that looked like weary resignation. She'd known he might be here. The foundation seat. Of course she'd known. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The auditorium emptied around them, people flowing toward the exits and the reception beyond, but Marcus and Jasmine stayed locked in place, held by 18 years of silence and all the things they'd never said. Finally, Jasmine started moving toward him. She walked with the same determination she'd once brought to organizing his calendar, to managing his life before it became too big for one person to manage. When she reached his row, she stopped. Marcus stood. They faced each other across 3 feet and 18 years. "You came," Jasmine said. Her voice was different too, harder, more certain. "I didn't know," Marcus said, and hated how his voice sounded. Defensive, weak. Jasmine's jaw tightened. "Didn't know what? That your foundation was sponsoring my son? That he'd be speaking today?" She laughed, and it was the saddest sound Marcus had ever heard. "The scholarship application requires a letter about family circumstances. I wrote about being a single mother. I wrote about raising Miles alone from the beginning. Your people vetted him. Someone on your staff read my letter." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had a staff of 40 people who managed the foundation. He signed off on final decisions, but he didn't read every application. every story. There were thousands of applicants. How was he supposed to know? I didn't read it, he said. I would have if I'd known it was you. Would you? Jasmine's eyes flashed. Would you have given him the scholarship, Marcus? Or would you have buried his application to avoid exactly this moment? He didn't have an answer. Couldn't have one because he didn't know what he would have done. What kind of man he'd become over 18 years of building empires while she'd built a person. Jasmine shook her head. It doesn't matter. Miles earned that scholarship. He earned everything he has. And he doesn't know about you. Marcus felt like she'd slapped him. What? He doesn't know, Jasmine repeated. And now there was something pleading in her voice. I told him his father wasn't in the picture. That's all. He's never asked for more and I've never volunteered it. And you're not going to tell him. Not tonight. Not like this. The hell I'm not, Marcus said. And his own anger surprised him. That's my son up there. I have a right. You have money, Jasmine cut him off. You don't have rights. Rights come from showing up. Rights come from being there at 3 in the morning when he has a fever, and you're terrified he'll stop breathing. Rights come from working 2 jobs to afford tutors. Rights come from 18 years of being his parent, and you weren't there for any of it, because you paid me not to exist. Her words landed like punches, and Marcus had no defense because they were true. All of it was true. I thought you, he started, then stopped. What could he say? I thought you terminated the pregnancy sounded like an accusation. I trusted you to do what I paid for sounded worse. I assumed you'd followed through on our agreement sounded like he was discussing a business deal instead of their child. You thought I'd do what was convenient for you. Jasmine finished for him. And when I didn't call, you were relieved. Don't pretend otherwise. You went on with your life and you never looked back. Marcus wanted to argue but couldn't. He had been relieved. He'd told himself it was for the best. He'd built his empire on the foundation of that relief, never questioning the silence because the silence made everything easier. Around them, the auditorium had nearly emptied. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the sounds of the reception beginning. Laughter and congratulations and all the normal sounds of people celebrating normal accomplishments. Jasmine glanced toward the doors. I need to go find Miles. He'll be looking for me. Wait, Marcus said, reaching out but not quite touching her. Please. I need to understand. Why didn't you tell me? After you decided to keep him. I would have, he faltered. I would have helped. Jasmine looked at him with something that might have been pity. Would you have Marcus? Really? Because I remember what you said that night. I remember every word. You said a baby would ruin everything you'd worked for. You said you couldn't let anyone or anything derail you. You looked at me like I was trying to trap you, like I'd gotten pregnant on purpose to, what? Get a piece of your success? She took a breath, steadying herself. You weren't ready to be a father then, and I didn't trust you to be one later. But 18 years, Marcus said. You kept him from me for 18 years. No, Jasmine said quietly. You gave him away before he was even born. I just didn't fight you on it. And I took your money because I needed it. Because I was 23 years old and pregnant and terrified, and you, the man I loved, the man I thought loved me back, looked at me like I was a problem to be solved with a check. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. We were together for 6 months. I was in love with you for every day of them, Jasmine said. And you were in love with your company? I knew that. I accepted it. But when I got pregnant, I guess I hoped. She laughed that sad laugh again. It doesn't matter what I hoped. You made yourself clear. They stood in the nearly empty auditorium, and Marcus felt the weight of 18 years pressing down on him. He'd built companies, made billions. His name was on museums and hospital wings. And none of it, absolutely none of it, meant anything compared to what Jasmine had built with their son. What do you want from me? Marcus finally asked. Do you need money? Better schools? I can help. Let me help. Jasmine's expression softened slightly, but there was steel underneath. I don't want your money, Marcus. I wanted your money 18 years ago, and I took it and I used it to survive the first year. After that, I made my own way. I have a good job now. Miles has had everything he needed. We're not a charity case. Then what? Marcus asked, desperate. What do you want from me? Jasmine looked at him for a long moment. What I want is for you to leave us alone. Miles is about to start his life. He has plans and dreams and a future that has nothing to do with you. Don't disrupt that because you're suddenly feeling guilty. He's my son. He's been my son for 18 years, Jasmine said. You don't get to show up now and claim him like he's something you lost and just found again. Before Marcus could respond, a voice called out from the back of the auditorium. Mom, you coming? Miles stood in the doorway, still in his graduation robes, looking for his mother. Marcus's breath caught. Up close, the resemblance was even more obvious. He could see his own features blended with Jasmine's, could see the person they might have been together if he hadn't been so terrified of being tied down. Coming, sweetheart, Jasmine called back, her voice instantly lighter. She turned back to Marcus and lowered her voice. Stay away from him, please. If you ever cared about me at all, stay away from my son. She walked away before he could answer, joining Miles at the door. Marcus watched them leave together, Jasmine's arm around their son's shoulders, Miles leaning down to say something that made her laugh. They looked like a unit, complete and whole without him. Marcus stood alone in the empty auditorium as the lights began to systematically shut off. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably his assistant wondering where he was, whether he was coming to the reception. He was supposed to give a short speech, present the scholarship checks, smile for photos. He pulled out his phone and stared at the screen without really seeing it. His hands were shaking. Everything was shaking. His entire life had just been revealed as a lie. Or if not a lie, then a willful ignorance. He'd spent 18 years building the wrong things, climbing the wrong mountains, winning the wrong battles. The phone buzzed again. Marcus ignored it. He thought about Miles on that stage, confident and brilliant, and heading to Yale. His son, a computer programmer interested in entrepreneurship, following in footsteps he didn't even know existed. Had Jasmine told him anything? Did Miles know his father existed at all, or did he think he was the product of some anonymous encounter? Some man who'd never mattered enough to mention? Marcus walked slowly toward the exits, his feet heavy on the auditorium carpet. The reception was in the building adjacent, connected by a covered walkway. Through the windows, he could see the crowd of graduates and families, the tables of refreshments, the photo opportunities. Somewhere in there, Jasmine and Miles were celebrating together, the way they'd probably celebrated everything together for 18 years. He should leave, get in his car, and drive back to Manhattan and pretend this never happened. It's what Jasmine wanted. It's what she'd asked him to do. Stay away. Don't disrupt Miles's life. You gave up that right 18 years ago. But as Marcus stood at the threshold between the empty auditorium and the celebration beyond, he realized he couldn't do it. Couldn't walk away. Not again. Not when his son was 50 feet away, alive and real and everything Marcus had been too afraid to want. He stepped into the walkway, pulled open the door to the reception hall. The noise hit him immediately. Happy chaos of voices and music. He scanned the crowd, looking for them. Found them near the back, surrounded by people congratulating Miles. Jasmine saw him enter and her expression shifted from joy to panic in an instant. Marcus started walking toward them. He didn't have a plan. Didn't know what he'd say. Only knew that he couldn't leave. Couldn't let this moment pass without at least trying to. What? Apologize? Explain? Beg for a chance he didn't deserve? He was halfway across the room when Miles turned and their eyes met. And Marcus saw his son's expression change from polite interest to confusion, because there was something familiar about this stranger crossing the room with such intensity. Something in the eyes or the walk or the way he carried himself that pinged some deep genetic recognition. Jasmine moved between them, her back to Marcus, talking quickly to Miles. But Miles was still looking over her shoulder, still trying to figure out why this man in the expensive suit was staring at him like he'd seen a ghost. Marcus stopped a few feet away, close enough to hear Jasmine say, "It's nothing, baby. Just someone from the foundation. He needs to talk to me about scholarship stuff." Miles looked skeptical but nodded. "I'll go find the guys," he said. but his eyes kept drifting back to Marcus with that confused recognition. Jasmine waited until Miles walked away before turning to face Marcus. Her voice was low and furious. "What are you doing?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I can't just leave." "You can and you will," Jasmine hissed. "We had an agreement. I asked you for one thing." "You asked me for the impossible," Marcus said. "That's my son. I have a son. You can't expect me to just walk away from that." "I can and I do," Jasmine said. "Because that's what you did to me. You walked away, and you never looked back, and you built your perfect life. Well, I built one too. Without you. And you don't get to show up now and destroy it because you're having some kind of crisis." "This isn't a crisis," Marcus said. "This is..." He stopped. What was it? Regret? Grief? A cosmic redistribution of everything he thought he knew about himself? Jasmine's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "Please," she said, and the word cost her. "Please, Marcus, give us time. Let me figure out how to tell him, when to tell him. Don't just spring this on him in the middle of his graduation party." "How long?" Marcus asked. "How long do I wait?" "I don't know," Jasmine said. "A few weeks, a month. He needs to process college, needs to enjoy this moment. This is supposed to be the happiest time of his life. Don't take that from him." Marcus wanted to argue that Miles deserved to know the truth, that hiding it was just another lie. But looking at Jasmine's face, at the exhaustion and fear written there, he realized this wasn't about him. It never had been. It was about Miles, about protecting him from the chaos that Marcus's reappearance would inevitably bring. "1 month," Marcus said. "You have 1 month to tell him. And then I'm coming back, whether you're ready or not." Jasmine nodded slowly. 1 month. They stood there, two people who'd created a life together and then spent 18 years apart. Marcus wanted to say more, wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but across the room Miles was looking back at them again with that puzzled expression, and Marcus knew he needed to leave before the situation got worse. "I'll go," he said. "But Jasmine?" "I meant what I said. 1 month. And then I meet my son properly." He turned and walked away before she could respond, before he could change his mind. The crowd parted around him, and he pushed through the doors back into the evening air. It was still perfect outside, still June and warm and full of promise. But everything had changed. Marcus got into his Bentley and sat there, hands on the steering wheel, unable to turn the key. Through the windows of the reception hall, he could see silhouettes of people celebrating. Somewhere in there was his son, laughing with friends, planning his future, unaware that his entire origin story was a lie. His phone rang. This time he answered. "Where are you?" his assistant asked. "They're waiting for you to present the scholarships." "I had to leave," Marcus said. "Emergency. Send my apologies and have them mail the checks. Is everything okay?" "No," Marcus said. "Nothing is okay." He hung up and finally started the car. The drive back to Manhattan was a blur of lights and thoughts. By the time he pulled into his building's garage, he'd made 17 decisions and reversed 16 of them. The only one that held was simple. He was going to be part of his son's life, whether Jasmine liked it or not, whether Miles wanted it or not, whether he deserved it or not. He'd spent 18 years being the man who walked away. He was done being that man. But as Marcus rode the elevator up to his penthouse, staring at his reflection in the polished brass doors, he saw something that made him pause. He looked older, tired, like someone who just realized they'd won the race to the wrong finish line. And somewhere in Connecticut, Jasmine was probably tucking their son in with some story about the man from the foundation who'd had to leave early, never mentioning that he was the father who'd paid to make sure Miles never existed. The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped into his multi-million-dollar apartment, all chrome and glass, and carefully curated emptiness. And for the first time in 18 years, he let himself imagine what it might have been like if he'd made a different choice that night. If he'd taken Jasmine's hand instead of handing her a check. If he'd been brave enough to want something more than success. The city lights glittered beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows, millions of lives happening simultaneously, and somewhere out there was his son, brilliant and unknown, carrying half of Marcus's DNA and none of his history. 1 month. He had 1 month to figure out how to be the father he should have been 18 years ago. Marcus poured himself a drink and stood at the window, watching the city that had always been his first love. But tonight, for the first time, it felt like second place. And that realization terrified him more than any business deal, any market crash, any failure he'd ever faced. Because what if, after everything, after 1 month and all the truth that would follow, Miles looked at him the way Jasmine had in his office 18 years ago, with love dying in his eyes, replaced by disappointment and the understanding that some choices can't be unmade, some absences can't be filled, some fathers aren't worth knowing after all. Marcus finished his drink and poured another. Tomorrow he'd start figuring out what came next. Tonight, he'd just survived the knowledge that he had a son named Miles, who was everything he'd been too afraid to hope for. And that knowing this changed absolutely everything about who Marcus Whitfield thought he was. The month that followed was the longest of Marcus's life. Every morning he woke up and resisted the urge to drive to Connecticut. Every night he fell asleep imagining conversations he had no right to have. He hired a private investigator on day 3, then fired him on day 4 when he realized how pathetic that was. He drafted 17 emails to Jasmine and sent none of them. He looked up Miles's social media and spent hours scrolling through photos of a life he'd missed. He tried to work, but couldn't focus. His assistant asked if he was sick. His board noticed his distraction. He closed a deal poorly enough that his CFO asked point blank if something was wrong. Marcus lied because the truth was impossible to explain. On day 12, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He went to a therapist, sat in an office and told a stranger with kind eyes that he had a son he'd never met, a son he'd essentially paid to abort, and that he didn't know how to fix what he'd broken. The therapist, Dr. Chen, didn't judge. She just listened as Marcus unspooled 18 years of guilt. When he finally stopped talking, she asked him a simple question. "What kind of father do you want to be?" Marcus had no answer. "I don't know if I even can be one. A good one, I mean." Dr. Chen tilted her head. "You're assuming you have to be perfect immediately. But children aren't ventures you invest in. They're people you show up for. Miles already has everything material he needs. What you're really asking is whether you have anything else to offer." The question haunted Marcus for days. What did he have to offer besides money? This wasn't a problem that wealth could fix. This was a relationship that needed to be built from nothing. On day 18, Marcus received a text from an unknown number. "This is Jasmine. Miles is asking questions. The way you looked at him at graduation, he noticed. He's been Googling your name. I'm running out of time. We need to talk. Tomorrow, noon, the coffee shop on 5th and 42nd. Marcus read the text 17 times. Miles was asking questions. That meant something had connected in that brief moment their eyes met. The next day, Marcus arrived 15 minutes early. When Jasmine walked in, she looked exhausted. She sat down without preamble. He knows something is off. He keeps asking about the man from the foundation, why you were staring at him. I told him you had an emergency, but he doesn't believe me. He's brilliant, Marcus. He can read people and he knows I'm hiding something. Then tell him the truth, Marcus said. Jasmine's hands trembled. How do I tell my son that his father paid me to abort him? That I took the money and disappeared? That I've let him believe his father just wasn't in the picture, rather than someone who explicitly didn't want him to exist? You tell him that I was 27 and terrified, and made the worst decision of my life, Marcus said. You tell him that you were brave and strong. You tell him the truth. All of it. Because he deserves that. And what happens after? When he hates me for lying? When he hates you for abandoning him? Then we deal with it together, Marcus said. We answer his questions honestly. We let him be angry. We give him whatever he needs. But we stop protecting him from the truth. Jasmine wiped her eyes. I'm so scared. I'm scared I'm going to lose him. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. You won't lose him. He loves you. One truth isn't going to erase 18 years of you being there every single day. Jasmine looked at their hands, then at Marcus. Why do you care so much? You didn't even know he existed until 2 weeks ago. Because I can't unknow that I have a son, Marcus said. I can't unsee him on that stage, and I can't waste another day not trying to be part of his life. Even if he hates me, I have to try. They sat in silence. Finally, Jasmine spoke. I'll tell him this weekend, Saturday. I'll sit him down and tell him everything. I want to be there. No, Jasmine said. I need to tell him alone first. Let him process. Then, if he wants to meet you, I'll arrange it. Marcus wanted to argue but knew she was right. How long do I wait? I don't know. A few weeks. A month. He needs to enjoy this moment. Don't take that from him. 1 month, Marcus said. You have 1 month to tell him. And then I'm coming back. Jasmine nodded slowly. 1 month. Saturday took forever to arrive. The text finally came Sunday morning at 8 a.m. He knows. He's angry and confused and hurt. But he wants to meet you. Today at 2, my apartment in Connecticut. Be prepared. He has a lot to say. Marcus spent the next 6 hours in controlled panic. Changed his clothes 4 times before settling on jeans and a button-down. Thought about bringing a gift, then remembered Jasmine's warning. Finally, at 1:15, he drove to Connecticut with his heart hammering. Jasmine's apartment was modest but warm, filled with photos of Miles growing up. Every wall held pictures of moments Marcus had missed. First day of school, birthday parties, Little League. A whole life, documented and celebrated. And there, sitting on the couch with his arms crossed, was Miles. The resemblance was even more striking up close. Miles, Jasmine said softly. This is Marcus Whitfield. I know who he is, Miles said coldly. I Googled him. Took me about 5 minutes to figure out why he was staring at me. We have the same eyes. It's kind of obvious once you're looking for it. I'm glad you agreed to meet me, Marcus said. Miles laughed without humor. Mom said I should hear what you have to say. Something about you wanting to be in my life now, after 18 years of not giving a damn. You're right to be angry, Marcus said. Angry doesn't even cover it. Miles stood up. Do you have any idea what it's like to find out your father didn't just leave, but actively tried to make sure you were never born? That he gave my mom money to get rid of me and then just went on with his life? No, Marcus said. I don't know what that's like. I'm sorry. You're sorry. Great. That fixes everything. Miles, Jasmine said, but he shook his head. No, Mom. You said I could say what I needed to say. Miles paced the room. Do you know what kills me most? You never checked. Never followed up. You assumed she'd done what you paid her to do and you were relieved. That's true, Marcus said quietly. I was relieved. I was building everything I thought I wanted, and a child felt like it would destroy that. I was wrong. But yes, you're right. I was relieved. Miles stared at him. Most people would make excuses. I was young and stupid, and I didn't understand, Marcus said. But those are reasons, not excuses. I made a choice, a terrible choice. And you've had to live with the consequences while I pretended it never happened. I'm not going to insult you by pretending that's anything other than abandonment. Miles's eyes filled with tears. I'm going to Yale in 3 months. I have everything planned. What makes you think I need you now? I don't think you need me, Marcus said. You and your mom have done an incredible job. You're brilliant and accomplished. I can't give you back what's gone. All of that is lost and I'll regret it forever. But I want to know you. I want to be part of your life going forward if you'll let me. Not trying to buy your affection or make up for lost time. Just as someone who cares about you and wants to show up for whatever comes next. I want to try to be your father, knowing I'll probably do it badly, but trying anyway because you deserve that. Miles wiped his eyes angrily. You're 18 years too late. I know, Marcus said. And if you tell me to leave and never come back, I'll respect that. But if you give me a chance, just one chance, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn a place in yours. The room fell silent. Jasmine stood by the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. Miles looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and something shifted. Pain was still there, and anger, but underneath was something else. Curiosity, or hunger for something he'd always wondered about. "I have questions," Miles finally said. "Ask me anything," Marcus replied. Miles sat back down, and Marcus took the chair across from him. Jasmine moved to sit beside Miles. "Why didn't you fight for us?" Miles asked. "When Mom disappeared, why didn't you look harder?" "Because fighting would have meant admitting I'd made a mistake," Marcus said carefully. "It would have meant facing the possibility that I was wrong. And I was a coward. I told myself your mom had made her choice. But the truth is, I didn't look harder because I didn't want to find a different answer. I wanted to believe it was over so I could keep building my company without complications. I chose ambition over courage." Miles absorbed this. "What about now? Why show up now?" "Because I looked at you on that stage and I saw myself," Marcus said. "Not just physically. I saw the person I was at 18 before I became obsessed with success. And I realized that I'd spent 18 years building an empire and I had no one to share it with. No one who mattered. I realized I'd won everything except the things that actually count." "So this is about you feeling empty?" Miles challenged. "No," Marcus said firmly. "This is about me realizing that I have a son who exists in the world, and that every day I don't know him is a day wasted. It's about wanting to be better than I was. And yes, it's partly about me, about wanting to stop being alone, but it's mostly about you. About not letting another day go by where you don't know that your father wants to know you. Because I am proud of you, Miles. Even though I had nothing to do with who you became, I'm proud that you're my son." "You don't even know me," Miles said quietly. "I know you're valedictorian. I know you're going to Yale. I know you're interested in entrepreneurship. I know you have your mother's strength and my stubbornness. And I want to know more. Everything. Whatever you're willing to share." Jasmine put her hand on Miles's arm. "Baby, this is your choice. Whatever you decide, I support you." Miles took a deep breath. "Okay, we can try. But you have to earn this. You don't get to just show up because you're my biological father. You have to actually show up. Be there. Prove you mean what you're saying." "I will," Marcus said. "I promise. I will show up." They talked for 3 more hours. Marcus answered honestly about everything. He told Miles about that night with Jasmine, about his panic and selfishness. He told him about the relief when she stopped calling. He told him about graduation, about having his entire world reorient. As the sun set, something shifted in the room. The anger softened. Eventually, Miles stood. "I need time to process." "Of course," Marcus said. "Take whatever time you need." Miles extended his hand. Marcus shook it firmly. "Can I have your number? In case I have more questions." They exchanged numbers. Seeing his son's name in his contacts felt precious. The next weeks were tentative but hopeful. Miles texted occasionally with questions. The conversations were careful but genuine. Marcus answered every text immediately. He learned Miles loved artificial intelligence, wanted to start his own company, was terrified and excited about Yale. 3 weeks later, Miles called. "Hey," he said. "Less guarded now. I was wondering if you wanted to grab lunch this weekend." "I would love that," Marcus said. They met at a casual restaurant. It was awkward at first, but gradually the conversation deepened. Miles asked what Marcus regretted most. Marcus told him about the photos on Jasmine's wall, understanding all the moments gone forever. "I regret all of it," Marcus said. "Every birthday, every milestone. But I can't change that. I can only try to be here for everything that comes next." Over the following months, they met regularly, sometimes just them, sometimes with Jasmine. Each meeting built on the last, creating something fragile but real. One evening in July, Marcus had dinner at Jasmine's apartment. The domestic scene felt surreal. After dinner, Miles excused himself, leaving them alone. "He's doing well with this," Jasmine said. "Better than I expected." "You raised an incredible person," Marcus said. "We raised him," she corrected. "He has your drive. I just gave him the love to use it for good." Marcus spoke quietly. "I've been thinking about what you said that day. About how I looked at you like you were a problem. I want you to know that's my biggest regret. Not just missing Miles, but that I threw away what we had. You were the best thing in my life, and I was too obsessed to see it. I'm sorry. You really have changed, Jasmine said. Maybe finding out you have a son reorders your priorities, Marcus said. I spent 18 years chasing the wrong things. I don't want to waste whatever time I have left. What are you saying? Jasmine asked. I'm saying I was an idiot. I'm saying these last weeks, having dinner with you and Miles, being part of something real, have meant more to me than the last 10 years combined. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. I spent 18 years getting over you, and now you show up different and I don't know what to do with that. I'm just telling you the truth, Marcus said. I see you now. Really see you. And you're extraordinary. Miles appeared. Hey, Mom, can Marcus stay and watch this documentary with us? Marcus looked at Jasmine, waiting. She smiled. Of course he can stay. They watched together, and Marcus felt contentment he'd forgotten existed. Not the rush of closing a deal, just simple contentment from being with people who mattered. As summer wore on, Marcus became a regular presence. He helped Miles prepare for Yale, took them to dinner, and slowly, something rebuilt between Marcus and Jasmine. They started having coffee together. The conversations were honest in a way their relationship had never been before. 2 weeks before Miles left for Yale, Marcus took them to dinner. Over dessert, Miles cleared his throat. Dad, I was wondering if you'd want to come to Yale with us for move-in day. The word dad was a miracle. I would be honored, Marcus said. Jasmine squeezed Marcus's hand under the table. They'd been dancing around whatever was happening between them. But in that moment, Marcus felt like they were building something that could last. Move-in day was chaotic and emotional. Marcus helped carry boxes, met Miles's roommate, took photos. And when it was time to say goodbye, Miles hugged Marcus. It was real and tight, and full of 18 years of healing. Thank you for showing up, Miles whispered. It means everything. Thank you for giving me a chance, Marcus said. I won't waste it. As they walked to the car, Marcus and Jasmine were quiet. When they reached the parking lot, Marcus turned to her. Do you want to get dinner? I'm not ready to drive back yet. Neither am I, Jasmine smiled. They found a small restaurant and ordered wine. The conversation flowed easily. They talked about Miles, about how fast 18 years had gone, about how broken things could heal. I never thought we'd end up here, Jasmine admitted. I didn't either, Marcus said. But I'm grateful. These months, getting to know Miles, getting to know you again, it's been the best thing that's ever happened to me. Better than your first billion? Yes. 1,000 times yes. What do you want from me? Jasmine asked. From this? I want to keep doing this, Marcus said. Having dinner with you, being in Miles's life together, and eventually, if you're open to it, I'd like to see if we could be more than co-parents. There's always been something between us, Jasmine said, even when I hated you. But I need you to understand I'm not the girl you knew. I won't be ignored or sidelined. I don't want you to be, Marcus said. I want a partner, an equal. I want what we could have had if I'd been brave enough the first time. Okay then, Jasmine smiled. Let's try. Slowly. But let's see where this goes. When Marcus dropped her off, she kissed him goodnight. It was soft and tentative, an acknowledgement of what had been and what might still be. Over the next months, they dated properly. Marcus courted Jasmine the way he should have 18 years ago. He learned about her work, her friends, her dreams. She told him about the years of raising Miles alone. Miles called regularly from Yale. Sometimes he called them together. And Marcus loved hearing Miles say Mom and Dad in the same sentence. At Thanksgiving, they had dinner at Jasmine's apartment. Marcus cooked, or tried to, with Jasmine laughing at his incompetence. After dinner, Miles raised his glass to second chances, to families that don't look traditional, but work anyway. To my mom, who gave me everything, and to my dad, who showed up late but showed up when it mattered. They clinked glasses, all crying, and Marcus thought about the path that led them here, the mistakes and years lost, but also the grace of getting another chance. By Christmas, Marcus and Jasmine were talking about the future. They compromised. Marcus would keep his penthouse but spend weekends in Connecticut. When Miles graduated, they'd figure out something permanent. On New Year's Eve, Marcus gathered them on his balcony. "This is my family," he said. "This is what matters. Everything else means nothing without this." "We're your family too," Jasmine said. "All of us. Together." As fireworks exploded over Central Park, Marcus held them close. He'd spent 18 years climbing the wrong mountain. But he'd found his way back and discovered the real summit had been waiting all along. Marcus learned what it meant to be a father through showing up day after day. The scars didn't disappear, but they worked through them together, building something stronger for having been broken. Marcus stepped back from his companies. He made time for what mattered, started saying no to deals that would have consumed him. On Miles's 19th birthday, Marcus gave him something that couldn't be wrapped. He set up a fund for when Miles was ready to start his company. But more importantly, he gave him what had been missing. A father who was there, who believed in him, who would support him no matter what. "You don't have to follow in my footsteps," Marcus told him. "I just want you to be happy, to find what you love, and I want to be there cheering you on." "I know, Dad," Miles said. That summer, Marcus proposed to Jasmine, quietly in her apartment with Miles there as witness. He told her she'd saved his life by giving him a second chance. She said yes through tears, and Miles hugged them both. They married in fall in a small ceremony. Miles walked his mother down the aisle. At the reception, Miles gave a toast. "My parents took the long way to get here," he said, "but they made it. And they taught me that it's never too late to choose love, never too late to do the right thing." Marcus and Jasmine danced, and then Miles cut in, dancing with his mother while Marcus watched with joy so intense it hurt. This was his family, built from mistakes and grace. Years later, Marcus would look back on graduation night as when his real life began. Miles graduated from Yale with honors, started his own company with Marcus's mentorship. Marcus and Jasmine bought a house in Connecticut filled with laughter and family dinners. Sometimes Marcus would look at photos on the walls, at all the years he'd missed. The grief never fully faded. But alongside it was gratitude for the years he didn't miss. He'd learned you can't change the past, but you can honor it by doing better. That real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in people who answer when you call. That being a father is about showing up day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Marcus had been given everything in life: money beyond imagination, power that shaped industries, influence that moved markets. His name was on buildings across Manhattan, on museum wings, on scholarship programs that helped thousands of students. He'd achieved every goal he'd set for himself in his 20s, checked every box that society said mattered. But none of it, absolutely none of it, compared to the moment Miles first called him Dad. None of it compared to holding Jasmine's hand across a dinner table while their son talked about his dreams. None of it compared to being part of something real, something that mattered beyond quarterly earnings and stock prices and the empty accolades of business success. The penthouse overlooking Central Park was still his, technically. But it felt more like a hotel room now, a place he stayed during the week when meetings ran late. His real home was the house in Connecticut, the one with Miles's childhood photos on the walls and Jasmine's books scattered on the coffee table, and the kind of comfortable clutter that came from people actually living somewhere, rather than just existing in a space designed for magazine spreads. He thought often about that night at graduation, about sitting in his car watching the reception through the windows, afraid to go in, afraid to face what he'd lost. He thought about the person he'd been then, hollow and successful, and utterly alone without even realizing it. That version of Marcus seemed like a stranger now, someone who'd valued all the wrong things and missed what was right in front of him. Miles called one evening during his junior year at Yale, not with questions or small talk, but with news. "Dad," he said, and Marcus still felt a little thrill every time he heard that word. "I wanted you to be the first to know outside of Mom. My company got accepted into the Yale Startup Accelerator. We're going to have real funding, real mentorship. It's actually happening." Marcus felt his chest swell with pride. "That's incredible, Miles. I'm so proud of you. Tell me everything." As Miles talked about his business plan, about the platform he was building to help first-generation college students access resources, Marcus found himself smiling so hard his face hurt. This was his son. Brilliant and compassionate and determined to use his talents to help others rather than just accumulate wealth. Everything Marcus should have been, and everything he was so grateful Miles had become despite his absence. When they hung up, Jasmine was watching him from the kitchen doorway. "You're a good father," she said softly. "He adores you, you know. He tells his friends about you all the time. About how you weren't there at first, but you showed up when it mattered. About how you taught him that it's never too late to change." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. "I'm just trying to make up for lost time." Jasmine crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. "You can't make up for it. But you can make the present so good that the past stops mattering as much. And you're doing that. Every single day, you're doing that." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, and Marcus thought about second chances, about grace, about the mysterious way life sometimes gave you exactly what you needed, at exactly the moment you were finally ready to receive it. He'd spent 18 years running from this, from family and connection and love. And now that he'd stopped running, now that he'd turned around and walked back toward the people he'd abandoned, he'd found what he'd been searching for all along. Peace. Purpose. Home. Not in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, but in a house in Connecticut with the woman he loved and the son they'd made together. Not in quarterly earnings or board meetings or deals that made headlines, but in quiet mornings and Sunday dinners and the ordinary magic of being part of something bigger than himself. The transformation hadn't been easy. There were still moments when Marcus's old instincts kicked in, when he almost said yes to a deal that would require months of his attention, when he almost prioritized work over family. But Jasmine called him on it, gently but firmly, reminding him of the promises he'd made and the man he was trying to become. And Miles, without even knowing it, kept him honest just by existing, by needing a father who was present rather than one who sent expensive gifts from overseas business trips. Marcus had learned to say no. No to acquisitions that would consume his life. No to speaking engagements that would take him away from important family events. No to the relentless pursuit of more that had defined his first 45 years. And in saying no to those things, he'd found space to say yes to what actually mattered. Yes to coaching Miles through difficult decisions. Yes to date nights with Jasmine where they actually talked instead of him checking his phone every 5 minutes. Yes to being fully present in his own life instead of always chasing the next thing. On their first wedding anniversary, Jasmine gave Marcus a gift that made him cry. It was a photo album she'd put together, chronicling their year of marriage but also including photos of Miles throughout his childhood. On the last page, she'd written a note. "These are the moments you missed and we can't get them back, but look at all the moments you haven't missed this year. Look at all the moments still to come. The past is the past. The future is ours to build together. I love you for the man you've become. I love you for showing up. I love you for choosing us every single day." Marcus held the album and wept, not with sadness, but with gratitude so profound it felt like it might split him open. He'd been given a second chance he didn't deserve, and he'd spent every day since trying to be worthy of it. Not perfect, never perfect, but present, engaged, committed to being the father Miles needed and the partner Jasmine deserved. As he sat there with the album in his lap and Jasmine beside him, Marcus made a silent promise to whatever force had given him this impossible gift. He would never take it for granted. He would show up every single day. He would be the father Miles deserved and the partner Jasmine needed. He would prove, through actions not words, that he'd learned his lesson, that he finally understood what mattered, that he was done chasing the wrong things. And sitting there in their home, with Jasmine's hand in his, and the knowledge that their son was out there pursuing his dreams with confidence and compassion, Marcus Whitfield finally felt like he'd made it. Not to the top of some corporate ladder, or the pinnacle of wealth and power, but to something infinitely more valuable. He'd made it home. And this time, he was never leaving again. The best part, Marcus realized, wasn't even the big moments. It wasn't Miles's graduation, or his own wedding, or the holidays they spent together. It was the ordinary Tuesdays, the quiet dinners, the lazy Sunday mornings, the phone calls where nothing important was discussed but connection was made anyway. It was Jasmine reading beside him on the couch. It was Miles texting him a funny meme with the caption, "Thought you'd like this, Dad." It was being part of the daily rhythm of people's lives rather than a distant figure who swooped in with grand gestures. Marcus had learned that love wasn't something you felt. It was something you did. It was showing up. It was being there. It was choosing every single day to prioritize the people who mattered over everything else. And in learning that, he'd found the only success that actually counted. The only wealth worth having. The only legacy that would outlive him. A family. His family. Built from mistakes and grace, from pain and perseverance, from the radical belief that people could change and love could survive even the worst choices. Years passed, and the family grew stronger. Miles graduated from Yale summa cum laude, his startup already gaining traction with investors. Marcus attended the ceremony with Jasmine, both of them crying as their son crossed the stage. This time, there were no secrets. This time, Marcus wasn't a stranger in the audience, but a father in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else. At the graduation party, Miles gave a speech thanking his parents, both of them. He talked about his mother's sacrifices, her strength, her unwavering belief in him. And he talked about his father's journey back to them, about second chances and redemption, and the courage it takes to admit you were wrong. "I'm lucky," Miles said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not everyone gets the parents I have. Not everyone gets to see their family choose love over pride, forgiveness over bitterness. You both taught me that the measure of a person isn't in never falling down, but in getting back up and trying again. Thank you for showing me what that looks like." Marcus couldn't speak for several minutes after that speech. Just held Jasmine's hand and let the tears flow, grateful beyond words for this son who'd somehow found it in his heart to forgive, to embrace, to call him Dad despite everything. The business that Miles built became successful, more successful than even Marcus had projected. But what made Marcus proudest wasn't the revenue or the user growth or the accolades. It was watching Miles turn down acquisition offers that would have made him wealthy beyond imagination, choosing instead to stay true to his mission of helping first-generation students. "You taught me that," Miles told him one day over lunch. "You taught me that building something meaningful matters more than building something profitable. I'm glad I got to learn from both versions of you. The one who only chased money, and the one who learned what actually counts." Marcus and Jasmine grew old together, not in the penthouse but in their Connecticut home, watching the seasons change through windows that looked out on the yard where they'd have loved lived.